I knew something was wrong the moment the bartender touched my arm. Not a friendly tap, more like a quiet alarm. His eyes told me a secret he couldn't say out loud. But rewind just a couple of hours. After months of missing my son, I finally stepped off that late afternoon train with a heart full of excitement. I could almost hear his childhood laughter as I spotted him at the station. Taller, older, but still my boy. We hugged so tight I felt the weight of every mile melt away. "Let's grab a drink, Mom," he said, grinning. "I've got a place you'll love." The pub he chose was pure comfort. Warm wood walls, a crackling fire, the soft hum of old country songs. Locals waved as we walked in, and I couldn't help but feel proud. My son knew everyone, and everyone seemed happy to see him. We ordered our drinks, settled into a corner booth, and for a moment I let myself believe life was perfect. Then, a chill. Not from the door or the weather, but from something in the air, like a shadow just beyond the light. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet unease was the start of a night that would change everything. I could still feel the crisp night air on my cheeks as we stepped into the pub, a gentle warmth wrapping around us like an old quilt. The door closed behind us with a soft thud, shutting out the cool evening and the faint rumble of passing cars. Inside, everything glowed. The walls were paneled in rich, honey-colored wood, and strings of tiny lights draped across the ceiling beams like captured stars. A slow tune drifted from an old jukebox in the corner, something bluesy, the kind of melody that fills spaces between words. My son Nathan held the door for me and flashed a grin that reminded me of his boyhood when he'd beam after building a perfect sandcastle. "This is my spot, Mom," he said. "You'll love it. Everyone here's practically family." I smiled back, warmed by his enthusiasm. It felt good to be with him again after months apart, too many months filled with long-distance calls and texts that never quite bridged the gap. Seeing him now, in his element, made my heart swell with a mother's quiet pride. We chose a small round table near the window. From here I could see the entire room, the polished bar stretching along one wall, the fireplace flickering near the back, and a scattering of locals hunched over their drinks, sharing quiet conversations. It felt friendly, lived in, the kind of place where stories linger in the walls. The bartender, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a deep burgundy apron, caught Nathan's eye and gave him a nod of recognition. Nathan waved back, clearly irregular. "That's Pete," he explained to me. "Best bartender in the city. He knows how to make a drink exactly the way you like it before you even know what you want." Pete approached with an easy smile. "Evening, Nathan. And you must be Mom." His voice was warm, but there was something in the way he looked at me. Just a flicker of something, like he was cataloging a detail he'd rather not know. I dismissed it, chalking it up to my imagination. We ordered a glass of red wine for me and a craft beer for Nathan. As Pete walked away, I leaned back in my chair and let out a contented sigh. "This place is charming," I said. "It suits you?" Nathan shrugged, a playful smile tugging at his lips. "It's home, you know? A spot to unwind." Our conversation started light. He told me about his job at the tech startup. Late nights, big ideas, the endless energy of youth. I listened, savoring each detail, picturing him in a bustling office with bright screens and ambitious plans. I shared updates from home, the neighbor's new puppy that wouldn't stop digging, the way the maple tree out front finally reached the second-floor windows. But as we talked, I noticed something odd. Every few minutes, Nathan's gaze darted to his phone. He'd glance down, thumb tapping the screen quickly, then flip it over as if to hide the glow. At first, I ignored it. Everyone checks their phones, I told myself. But the pattern continued, an insistent, subtle rhythm that didn't match the casual ease of our conversation. He laughed at my stories, but his eyes kept shifting, scanning the screen like a sailor watching for distant storms. "Busy night?" I teased, keeping my voice light. "Huh? Oh, no," he said too quickly. "Just work stuff. Nothing important." I smiled, but a small knot formed in my stomach. The kind a mother recognizes, a quiet instinct that something isn't quite right. Pete returned with our drinks, setting them down gently. The wine's deep garnet color shimmered in the low light. "Enjoy," he said. But as he straightened, his eyes lingered on Nathan for half a heartbeat longer than necessary. Then he glanced at me, a quick, almost imperceptible flicker that carried a message I couldn't read. I wrapped my hands around the glass, letting the warmth of the room settle me, yet a chill crept in around the edges. We talked more, about a movie Nathan had seen, a new restaurant opening downtown, but I could tell he wasn't fully present. His fingers drummed lightly on the table, a nervous rhythm. Each time the door opened, his head turned sharply before he forced himself back into conversation. The pub's door creaked again, and a pair of strangers stepped inside. 2 men in dark jackets, their faces partly shadowed by the dim light. They paused near the entrance, scanning the room like they were taking inventory. One of them whispered to the other, then they moved to the bar without ordering right away. I noticed Pete stiffen slightly as they entered. He gave them a curt nod, but no smile. Nathan glanced over his shoulder, his body tensing just enough for me to feel it across the table. When he turned back, he tried to mask it with a sip of beer, but his hand trembled just enough to ripple the foam. I followed his gaze discreetly. The 2 men leaned in close, speaking in hushed tones. One pulled out a phone, the screen's glow flashing across his sharp features. A low murmur of conversation filled the pub, but their whispers seemed to slice through it, sharp and deliberate. I felt a prickle along the back of my neck. Something was building, an undercurrent beneath the easy music and cozy lights. I tried to draw Nathan back to lighter topics, asking about his childhood friends, the ones who used to build forts in our backyard. He smiled at the memory, but even as he spoke, his eyes flickered toward those men. Pete came by again, wiping down a nearby table. He moved slower this time, as if buying himself a moment to observe. His gaze shifted from the strangers to Nathan, then to me. Our eyes met, and I caught that flicker again. Concern, maybe even warning. I forced a polite smile, but inside my mind was spinning. Nathan's phone buzzed against the wood of the table. He snatched it up instantly, reading a message with a clenched jaw. His response was quick, almost frantic, before he placed the phone face down once more. "Everything okay?" I asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just a work thing. You know how it is." But I knew it wasn't just work. I could feel the tension, the kind that hums beneath the skin. The strangers at the bar ordered finally, their eyes occasionally darting our way. Each time Pete's shoulders tightened. I tried to steady my breathing. I told myself I was imagining things, letting city nerves get the best of me. But the signs were too many. Nathan's restless glances, the bartender's silent signals, the men who seemed to watch without watching. The music played on, a gentle guitar, a voice low and soulful, but beneath it all, a different rhythm pulsed. A mother's intuition, sharp as a blade, telling me that this quiet pub was anything but safe. And as Nathan looked toward the door yet again, his expression a mixture of anticipation and worry, I felt the first stirrings of dread I couldn't explain. Only that something was coming, and it had already begun. The music from the old jukebox faded into a soft hum, leaving the quiet clink of glasses and low murmurs of conversation to fill the room. I took another slow sip of my wine, hoping to steady the unease curling in my stomach. Nathan was still half focused on his phone, thumb twitching across the screen like he was chasing something he didn't want me to see. That's when Pete, the bartender, stepped out from behind the counter. I barely noticed him at first. He moved with a deliberate calm, a towel slung over his shoulder, wiping his hands as if nothing in the world demanded urgency. But there was an undercurrent in the way he walked, measured, purposeful, like someone approaching a sleeping animal he didn't want to startle. He came straight to our table. "Everything good here?" he asked, his voice even but carrying a weight I couldn't place. Before I could answer, he rested one broad hand on the back of my chair and leaned slightly closer. The other hand reached out, warm and firm, and closed gently but unmistakably around my forearm. I froze. The room seemed to shrink around us. His grip wasn't rough, but it was steady, enough to let me know this wasn't a casual touch. He lowered his voice to a near whisper, his breath warm against my ear. "Ma'am?" he said, the word almost lost beneath the soft guitar music. "You need to leave. Right now." For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" My voice cracked with confusion. "You need to leave. Quietly. Don't make a scene." His eyes held mine, steady and serious. "Please." My pulse quickened, a hot rush of adrenaline flooding my chest. I opened my mouth to ask why, but he shook his head. Just a subtle tilt, a silent plea to keep quiet. His grip tightened for a fraction of a second, then eased. "Trust me," he added softly. "Go. Now." Every instinct screamed to demand an explanation, but something in his gaze, a raw, urgent sincerity, stopped me cold. He straightened, wiping his hands on the towel again as if nothing had happened, and stepped back toward the bar without another word. I sat there, stunned, my fingers trembling around the stem of my glass. Across from me, Nathan looked up, oblivious. "You okay, Mom? You look like you just saw a ghost." I forced a shaky smile. "Just a little lightheaded. Maybe the wine." But inside, my thoughts raced. Why did Pete want me to leave? What danger did he see? I scanned the room. The two men in dark jackets still lingered at the bar, their heads tilted together, speaking in low, clipped tones. One of them glanced our way, and though his expression was blank, the moment his eyes met mine, I felt a chill slide down my spine. Nathan's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it quickly, his jaw tightening as he read whatever message had arrived. Without a word, he slid the phone back into his pocket and forced a smile I didn't believe. I swallowed hard, trying to calm the storm building inside me. If I bolted now, Nathan would know something was wrong. And if Pete was right, if there truly was a reason to leave, drawing attention might make things worse. I needed a plan. "Excuse me?" I said lightly, standing. "I'm just going to freshen up." Nathan barely looked up. "Sure, Mom." I took a slow breath and moved toward the restroom, every step a careful performance. My heart hammered against my ribs, but outwardly I forced a casual pace, as though nothing at all were amiss. The restroom door closed behind me with a soft click, muffling the chatter and music of the pub. For a moment, I simply gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady my hands. The mirror reflected a face pale with rising fear. Pete's words echoed in my mind. "You need to leave." Quietly. "Don't make a scene." Leave without my son? The thought tore at me, yet the urgency in his eyes was impossible to ignore. I turned the faucet on, letting cold water run over my fingers as if that could cool the heat of panic. What if I slipped out the side door and called Nathan later? What if he was in danger too? I weighed every option. Walk back to the table, pretend nothing happened, and insist we leave together. Call 911 from the restroom, though I had no clear crime to report. Trust that Pete's warning was real. That every second mattered. My mind replayed every detail of the evening. Nathan's nervous glances, the stranger's whispered conversation, the bartender's sharp, assessing looks. None of it felt random. I cracked the restroom door a few inches and peered out. From this angle, I could see the bar. Pete met my eyes for a fleeting second. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight, and with the subtlest motion, he gave a single, firm nod, downward toward the back of the pub, as if directing me toward a quieter exit. I shut the door softly and leaned against it, heart pounding. Leave through the back. That had to be what he meant. I took a deep breath, gripping the small strap of my purse as though it were a lifeline. But a sudden pang stopped me. Nathan. My only child. The thought of walking out without him, of leaving him in a place that might hold danger, nearly broke me. I pressed a hand to my chest, forcing myself to think clearly. Maybe I could slip outside, call him immediately, and urge him to follow. Maybe I could get help first, then return with someone, police, anyone, before whatever threat hovered here became real. Another sound interrupted my thoughts, the sharp scrape of a chair from the main room. Voices rose briefly, then hushed. I inhaled, steadying myself. I opened the door again, just enough to catch sight of the strangers. They were no longer seated. They stood near the end of the bar now, angled toward the hallway that led to the restrooms. My pulse spiked. Pete intercepted them with a casual stride, blocking their view of the hallway for a crucial second. He picked up 2 empty glasses, spoke a few words I couldn't hear, and nodded toward the front entrance. They hesitated, exchanged a glance, then turned slightly back toward their bar stools. But their eyes kept drifting toward the hallway. I closed the door silently and locked it, my heart slamming like a fist against my ribs. My options narrowed. Either slip out the back unnoticed or stay hidden and pray. I thought of Nathan again. His easy grin, his quick hugs as a boy, the way he'd just shared his world with me tonight. I couldn't simply vanish. Yet Pete's warning was clear. I pressed my forehead to the cool wooden door and whispered to myself, think, think. Another memory surfaced. The narrow window above the sink, a small square of glass I'd noticed without much thought when I entered. It looked old, but maybe it opened. I turned, studying it more carefully. It was small, uncomfortably so, but just wide enough for a determined woman to slip through. Beyond it, I could see the faint glow of an alley light. The idea was terrifying, but so was staying. I reached up, unlatching the stiff metal lock. The window creaked as I pushed it open, the sound loud to my hyper-alert ears. I paused, listening. Outside, the alley was silent except for the distant hum of traffic. I took another deep breath and reminded myself, pretend everything is normal while planning your next move. My next move was forming. Dangerous, uncertain, but necessary. Pete's words replayed once more, steady and insistent. You need to leave, right now. I tightened the strap of my purse across my shoulder, ready to act, every nerve alive with fear and resolve. Whatever waited beyond that window, it had to be safer than what lingered in the shadows of that pub. And with that thought, I prepared to slip into the night, trusting a stranger's warning more than the comfort of the cozy room I had entered so innocently only an hour before. The mirror above the sink reflected a face I barely recognized, pale, tense, eyes wide with the kind of fear that creeps in only when your instincts scream that something is terribly wrong. I pressed both palms against the cool porcelain to steady myself. The faucet dripped in a slow, deliberate rhythm, a metronome to the panic hammering in my chest. I closed my eyes and forced a breath, then another. Think, I whispered. Just think. Pete's warning replayed in a relentless loop. You need to leave. Right now. His grip on my arm had been firm, almost protective. He hadn't looked like a man prone to theatrics. If he said I needed to go, there had to be a reason. But Nathan, my son, was still out there, seated at the table, likely wondering why his mother was taking so long. The idea of walking out without him felt like a betrayal of every promise I'd made since the day he was born. Yet the urgency in Pete's eyes told me that staying might mean betraying something even more precious. Our safety. I turned toward the narrow window above the toilet, the same one I'd noticed earlier almost in passing. The glass pane was smudged and slightly warped with age, a faint yellow glow from the alley light seeping through. Could I even fit? I stepped onto the cool tile lid of the toilet to get a closer look. The frame was stiff when I first pressed against it, but desperation lends strength. I slid the rusty latch to the side. It squealed faintly, and I froze, straining to hear beyond the door. The low hum of voices from the bar remained steady. No sudden footsteps, no approaching knocks. I exhaled and pushed again. The window creaked open, inch by stubborn inch, until a thin blade of night air sliced across my face. Cold. Sharper than I'd expected. Behind me, the restroom smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and damp wood. Ahead, the alley offered only darkness and the faint sound of dripping water. I lowered my purse strap across my chest so it wouldn't snag, then tested the narrow opening with one arm, angling my shoulder through first. The old wood scraped against my sweater, but I kept going, inching forward until the rest of me began to slide through. For a moment, I was wedged halfway, feet still on the toilet seat, torso outside. I twisted, heart pounding, aware of how exposed I'd be if anyone entered the restroom now. One sharp tug and I was free, landing with a soft thud on the damp pavement below. The air outside smelled of wet brick and faint cigarette smoke. A chill raised goosebumps on my skin. The alley was narrow, flanked by tall brick walls mottled with age and graffiti. A distant street lamp cast a pale cone of light at the far end, where the alley opened toward the main road. I crouched for a second, pulling the window closed behind me as much as I dared. The faint music from the pub sounded muffled now, like a memory. My heart raced in an uneven rhythm. I had done it. I'd slipped out unseen. But the night was far from over. I crept toward the mouth of the alley, my footsteps silent on the damp ground. My mind churned with questions. Why had Pete warned me? Who were those men at the bar? And, most of all, what about Nathan? Reaching the corner, I flattened myself against the cool brick and peeked around. From this angle, I could see the front of the pub. The main door opened, letting out a slice of warm light and a burst of muted laughter. Through the window, I caught a fleeting glimpse of Nathan still seated at our table, phone in hand, his posture tense. The two men at the bar shifted occasionally, their eyes flicking toward him in a way that made my stomach knot tighter. I considered my options. I could run to the police station I'd passed 2 blocks back. I could call 911 right now. But something deeper, an instinct I couldn't ignore, told me I needed to stay close to Nathan, to understand what was happening before anyone else got involved. Then, as if on cue, Nathan stood. He said something to Pete, too quick for me to read, and moved toward the exit. My breath caught. The 2 men exchanged a glance and casually followed, leaving a few bills on the counter. I ducked back into the shadows. My heart beat a thunderous drum in the quiet alley. The pub door opened again. Nathan stepped out into the cool night, hands in his jacket pockets, head turning slightly as if checking for someone. The strangers emerged seconds later, keeping a careful distance. A mother's instinct can be louder than reason. Before I knew it, my feet carried me forward. I kept to the edges of the alley, using the darkness as cover, trailing behind at a careful distance. The pavement was slick from an earlier rain, reflecting the glow of streetlights like broken glass. Nathan turned down a narrow side street, his pace quick but not hurried, like a man with a purpose. The 2 men followed at a deliberate interval, their movements measured, coordinated. I followed too, each step a calculated risk. My heart raced so hard it felt as if it might give me away. Every sound, the scrape of my shoes on gravel, the distant hum of traffic, seemed magnified in the night air. Questions battered me. Was Nathan in trouble? Had he done something he couldn't tell me about? Or were these men after him for reasons beyond anything I could imagine? The city felt different now, stripped of its familiar charm. Storefronts loomed like silent witnesses. Shadows stretched long and thin across the sidewalks. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, then faded. I kept my focus on Nathan's figure, the set of his shoulders, the subtle urgency in his stride. I wanted to call his name, to run to him, but instinct warned me to remain silent, invisible. As we turned another corner, the street narrowed even more, hemmed in by old brick buildings with dark windows. Nathan slowed briefly, glancing over his shoulder. I ducked behind a trash bin just in time, pressing myself against the cold metal, barely daring to breathe. The two men slowed as well, sharing another brief look. One spoke into a phone, voice low and sharp. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my fingertips. I remembered the feel of Pete's hand on my arm, the quiet urgency of his words. You need to leave. Right now. I had left, but I was far from safe, and neither was my son. A gust of wind swept through the narrow street, carrying the faint scent of rain and something metallic, like rust. I shivered, both from the cold and from the weight of what I was witnessing. Nathan started walking again, this time with a more determined pace, and the men followed. I tightened the strap of my purse and slipped out from behind the bin, keeping my distance but refusing to lose sight of him. Each step felt like a vow. I would not let him face this alone. The night stretched before me, silent, watchful, and thick with unanswered questions. As I trailed my son through the darkened streets, my heart pounding with a mix of terror and unshakable resolve. The night had a way of swallowing sound. Each step I took seemed louder than the last, though the damp pavement muffled everything. I stayed far enough behind Nathan to blend into the pools of shadow between street lamps, never letting my pace betray the frantic pulse beneath my calm exterior. He walked with a purpose, shoulders slightly hunched against the cool air, hands tucked in his jacket pockets. Every few moments he glanced over his shoulder. Each time I ducked behind whatever cover I could find, an overflowing trash bin, the edge of a shuttered storefront, the deep recess of a doorway. My mind churned with 1,000 thoughts, each more unsettling than the last. Where are you going, Nathan? Why are these men following you? What have you gotten yourself into? A mother's intuition is both a blessing and a curse. It sharpens your senses, makes you see dangers others might miss. But it also fills every empty space with worst-case scenarios. The city around us had changed. The lively restaurants and cheerful bars were behind us now, replaced by narrow side streets lined with dark windows and locked gates. A single flickering streetlight cast broken shadows that stretched and twisted across the cracked pavement. Nathan's pace quickened as he turned down an even narrower lane. I hesitated before following, my breath clouding in the chill. The alley smelled of damp brick and faint motor oil. Water dripped from a fire escape, a slow, rhythmic patter that echoed off the walls. I kept my distance, counting on the night to cloak me. Then, from a side door half hidden by ivy, another figure emerged, a man I hadn't seen before. He wore a dark coat and a knit cap pulled low over his brow. He joined Nathan without a word, falling into step beside him as though they'd planned this rendezvous all along. My stomach tightened. A few paces behind them, the two men from the pub approached, their movements deliberate but unhurried. They didn't call out. They didn't need to. Their presence alone carried a quiet authority that prickled the hairs on the back of my neck. I slipped into the shadow of a recessed doorway, holding my breath as the group passed beneath a flickering streetlight. Nathan said something I couldn't catch, his voice low, urgent. The newcomer responded with a curt nod. One of the men from the pub tilted his head toward a side street, and without hesitation, they all turned that way. The sound of their footsteps faded, replaced by the thud of my own heart. I pressed a hand against the cold brick beside me, steadying myself. Fear coiled tight in my chest, but something stronger pushed me forward. The unshakable need to know what was happening to my son. I followed again, careful to keep to the darkest edges of the street. The moon peeked briefly through a break in the clouds, casting a silver sheen over the wet pavement. I moved quickly, my shoes barely whispering against the ground. Every nerve in my body felt alive, ears tuned to every creak and echo, eyes scanning for movement. I imagined every possible danger. A hidden weapon, a sudden confrontation, a trap I couldn't see. The group ahead slowed near an abandoned warehouse. Its windows were boarded, and a rusted sign swung lazily in the breeze. Nathan and the stranger in the knit cap stepped closer to a side entrance, while the two men from the bar lingered a short distance away, like silent sentries. I crouched behind a stack of discarded wooden pallets, straining to hear. Their voices reached me in fragments, carried by the restless wind. "Delivery tonight. Keep it quiet. Can't risk." The words were muffled, but the tension was unmistakable. My throat went dry. What kind of delivery required a clandestine meeting in a deserted part of town? Nathan's posture told its own story. His shoulders were tight, his movements quick, as if he wanted the conversation over. He gestured sharply, then checked his phone again. A sudden pang of fear gripped me. Was he in trouble? Was he helping these men willingly, or was he caught in something far beyond his control? I thought of the little boy who once collected baseball cards and begged me for one more bedtime story. I thought of the young man who called me after his first job interview, his voice bubbling with excitement. That was my Nathan. The thought that he might now be tangled in something dangerous sent a cold wave through me. I forced myself to breathe, slow and quiet, as the men's discussion continued. One of them, broad-shouldered, with a scar visible even in the dim light, handed Nathan a small black duffel bag. Nathan hesitated before taking it. My heart pounded so hard I feared they might hear it. After another brief exchange, the man in the knit cap pointed toward the far end of the street. Nathan nodded once, clipped and serious. Then they moved. The group dispersed, splitting in two directions. The two men from the bar peeled off toward the main road, while Nathan and the newcomer slipped down an even narrower side alley. I bit my lip, torn. Follow Nathan and the stranger, or track the others to see where they went. The answer came from my gut. I couldn't let Nathan out of my sight. I waited a few seconds, long enough to avoid being noticed, then hurried after them. The alley was darker than the last, barely illuminated by a single weak bulb over a rusted doorway. The smell of damp concrete mixed with something acrid, like old smoke. Nathan walked briskly, head bent toward the stranger as they spoke in hushed tones. I caught only scraps of words. "Drop off. Careful tomorrow night." But it was enough to tighten the knot in my stomach. Questions pounded through my mind. Was this about money? Drugs? Something worse? I longed to call out to him to demand an explanation, but instinct kept me silent. If I revealed myself now, I might scare him. Or worse, put us both in danger. We turned another corner, emerging onto a wider street lined with shuttered storefronts. A neon sign flickered weakly above a closed laundromat, the only color in the gray stretch of night. Nathan stopped suddenly. I pressed myself into the shadow of a doorway, barely breathing. He handed the duffel bag back to the stranger, who gave a short nod before disappearing into a doorway that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Nathan lingered for a moment, running a hand through his hair. The weight of something, guilt, worry, seemed to settle on his shoulders. Then, with a resigned sigh, he turned and began walking toward the main road, alone. Relief and dread warred inside me. He was alone now, but the mystery remained. I followed at a safe distance as he retraced his steps through the warren of side streets. The city seemed quieter than before, every sound amplified. The buzz of a flickering streetlight, the distant hum of traffic, the faint bark of a dog blocks away. My mind wouldn't stop racing. Was he being threatened? Was he working with them? Should I confront him now, or wait until morning when the danger might have passed? Each possibility felt heavier than the last. Yet beneath the fear pulsed something steadier. Determination. No matter what, I would uncover the truth. I thought of Pete again, the bartender whose quiet warning had set all this in motion. Perhaps he'd seen Nathan with these men before. Perhaps he knew more than he could safely say. A sharp gust of wind swept through the street, sending a loose newspaper skittering across the pavement. Nathan paused, glancing over his shoulder. I pressed myself against a brick wall, heart thudding. After a moment, he resumed his pace, finally turning onto a better-lit avenue that led back toward the heart of the city. I followed, keeping just far enough behind to remain invisible. My legs ached, and the chill seeped through my jacket, but I barely felt it. All I could think was that my son was hiding something dangerous, and that tonight, in the dark maze of these city streets, I was closer than ever to learning what it was. And no matter where this path led, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would not stop until I uncovered the truth. The city never truly sleeps. Even in the deepest hours of night, a restless hum lingers. A far-off siren, a whisper of wind through the alleys, the occasional rumble of a passing car. I heard all of it as I followed Nathan back toward the busier streets, the glow of distant neon softening the hard edges of my fear. For nearly an hour, I had trailed him through a maze of side streets and empty storefronts. My heart ached with questions and a dread that settled like ice in my chest. Each step was a battle between terror and love, between the need to protect and the fear of what I might discover. Nathan slowed when we reached a quiet park bordered by iron fencing and a row of flickering street lamps. He stepped through the gate and crossed to a secluded bench beneath an ancient oak. The branches stretched wide above him, their skeletal silhouettes swaying against a cloudy moon. I held back, hidden behind a cluster of bare shrubs, watching as he pulled out his phone. The blue glow illuminated his face. Tired, tense, older than the boy I'd kissed goodbye months earlier. He scrolled rapidly, then made a call, his voice low but urgent. Dropped it off. Yes, everything's set for tomorrow night. I know the risk. I'll handle it. My stomach clenched. Dropped what off? What risk? He ended the call and buried his face in his hands, elbows resting on his knees. Even from a distance, I could feel the weight pressing down on him. I couldn't hide any longer. I stepped from the shadows, the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes louder than a gunshot in the stillness. Nathan's head snapped up. Mom? His voice cracked with disbelief. What are you doing here? I moved closer, my breath visible in the cold air. I could ask you the same thing, I said softly. I've been following you, Nathan, from the pub. I saw everything. His eyes widened in shock and something else. Fear. You followed me? I had to, I said, my voice trembling. The bartender warned me to leave. Those men at the bar, who are they? What's going on? He stood quickly, glancing around as if the shadows themselves might be listening. Mom, you shouldn't be here. It's not safe. My heart pounded. Not safe? Nathan, tell me the truth. What are you involved in? He raked a hand through his hair, pacing a tight circle. It's complicated. Then simplify it, I urged. I'm your mother, please. For a long moment he said nothing, his breath clouding in the cold night. Finally, he stopped pacing and met my eyes. I'm working with an investigative group, he said quietly. Off the books. We're gathering evidence on a trafficking ring. The men you saw tonight, they're part of the operation. I was the drop. The duffel bag had documents. Proof we need to bring them down. The words hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Trafficking? My voice wavered. Nathan, this is dangerous. You could be killed. I know, he said, his jaw tightening, but someone has to expose them. I couldn't tell you. If you knew, you'd be at risk too. My knees felt weak. I sank onto the bench, the cold wood seeping through my coat. Images flashed through my mind. Nathan as a little boy racing through the yard, his laughter bright as sunlight. Nathan at his college graduation, eyes shining with hope. And now, my son risking his life in the dark corners of the city. He crouched in front of me, his hands gentle on mine. "I'm careful," he said. "We're careful. The men you saw tonight think I'm just a courier. They don't know who I really work for." Tears stung my eyes. "But if they find out—" "They won't," he insisted, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "We're close to shutting them down. Just a little longer." The reality of the danger settled over me like a lead blanket. All the subtle signals, the bartender's warning, the hushed conversations, the shadowed streets, suddenly made terrible sense. Pete must have recognized the men for what they were and feared for me. I squeezed Nathan's hands, my own trembling. "You should have told me." "I couldn't," he said. "It's safer this way, and you weren't supposed to be here. I thought I'd keep you out of it." A gust of wind rustled the oak branches, scattering a few brittle leaves across the ground. The sound felt like a whispered reminder of how fragile everything was. I searched his face, the face I had known since the day he was born. Love flooded through me, fierce and unyielding, battling with fear that threatened to break me. "You're my son," I whispered. "There's nothing in this world that will stop me from protecting you." He gave a small, sad smile. "I know, Mom. But tonight, I'm the one protecting you." I reached up, cupping his cheek. "Then let's protect each other." We sat there for a long moment, the city's distant sounds wrapping around us like a low, restless tide. Finally, he straightened. "I need to get you back to your hotel," he said. "It's late, and it's safer if we're not seen together." I wanted to argue, to insist on staying by his side until this nightmare ended. But I saw the resolve in his eyes, the same stubborn determination that had carried him through every challenge since childhood. "All right," I said softly, "but promise me you'll be careful. Promise you'll come home when this is over." "I promise," he said. We walked side by side through the quiet streets, every step measured, every shadow a potential threat. My fear hadn't vanished. It pulsed beneath my skin. But alongside it was a deeper strength, born of love and the fierce resolve to stand with my son no matter what came next. As we neared the brighter lights of the main road, I glanced at him and felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly stole my breath. This night had begun as a simple visit to share a drink. It had become something far greater, a revelation of courage, of hidden battles fought in the dark. The truth was out now, heavy and dangerous, but it bound us together in a way nothing else could. Whatever lay ahead, I knew one thing with unshakable certainty. We would face it, mother and son, hearts fierce and unbroken, until the darkness itself surrendered to the dawn. The city is quiet now, but the echoes of this night stay with me. Every shadowed alley, every whispered word, every heartbeat that nearly stopped in fear. I came here simply to visit my son, to share a drink and a hug after months apart. Instead, I stepped into a world I never imagined, a world my son has been walking alone for far too long. I think of Nathan's eyes when he finally told me the truth. Brave, burdened, and still somehow the same boy who once reached for my hand crossing a busy street. The danger he faces is real, and though I cannot fight every battle for him, I can stand beside him, unyielding. Tonight taught me that being a mother doesn't end when your child is grown. It means protecting them, even when they think they don't need protecting. It means loving them fiercely enough to follow them into the dark, and to believe in the light they carry within. Whatever storms wait ahead, Nathan will never face them alone. My heart, my instinct, my bond with him, they are stronger than fear, stronger than night, strong enough to guide us both home.